Hi friends, it's Steph here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing another goal catch-up vlog and I'm going to be trying to finish off a series, but in particular the In Finley famous series. I have 3 books left, Spotlight, Fandom and Encore. I'd like to try and get them done. I have been reading a lot of paranormal romance, urban fantasy, etc. this month, and I just need something to palate cleanse for a couple of days. So I'm just going to try and make my way through these books because I just need something different. So we're going to start off with Spotlight. I read Popstar maybe earlier in the year, or was it last year? I can't remember. Anyway, I've read book 1. This is only 286 pages and yeah, it's about, oh hang on, let's see if I can open up the summary because it's been a while since I read Popstar. So Ryder and Lyric is a nanny. Ryder is a member of the boy band, but he left because he was raising his daughter. So nanny romance, queer nanny romance. Radio, I will update you when I have an update. So I'm 40% of the way into Spotlight and it's a really cute story that's also kind of complicated. So Ryder was the member of the boy band who basically said he wanted to stop playing because he had a daughter, and that was when he was 22 and she's nearly 5 in this book and she's utterly adorable. Anyway, he's still finding difficulty because people recognize him and then you have paparazzi trying to take photos of his daughter and things like that. Anyway, he has this meet cute moment with Lyric at a play center that he's taken his daughter to, and Lyric is there with his nephew, and after insulting Ryder's old band, they end up, you know, talking, and surprisingly they get along, and Lyric says that, you know, he's a nanny, and there's some banter around Ryder needing a nanny, and so eventually that's what comes about. Lyric is hired as Kaylee's nanny and they're starting to spend time together, and one thing that I appreciate about this is that there's a really interesting discussion around how Ryder identifies, because he doesn't necessarily apply a label to himself because he doesn't feel comfortable with any of the labels that exist and how he defines himself. I think there was a point where he said, you know, some days he feels totally gay, but that he then feels that he's being disingenuous and by not acknowledging the bi label, and that maybe he's pan, but in some days he's just attracted just to guys, or sometimes it's to everyone, and sometimes he's just not attracted to anyone at all, and so he doesn't really know where he fits in that umbrella, which I think is fairly relatable. I think you are allowed to adapt that. I think it's great that some people clearly identify one particular way. I think that's always great, but I also think that there is room for people to move across a spectrum of things, and I think that's true of most things in life. So I like that representation in a book, and at the moment we don't have much information about Kaylee's mother, although she has nightmares about her mother, and the most recent one was about explosions, and part of me wonders whether she's in the military, but I mean, I could be way off base here. I guess I'll find out as I keep reading. And the other thing that comes about is that Ryder hears Lyric sing, because Lyric wants to be a musician, but he has some very, very specific ways that he wants to share his music with the world. There's a joke that he's indie and Ryder is mainstream, and that Lyric keeps bombing out on auditions and things because he is not willing to conform. He's not willing to compromise what he believes is what he wants to achieve, and that has to do with some family stuff that you find out about. So it's really interesting, and I think the interplay of both their professional relationship as boss and nanny, and also the relationship between, you know, professional musician turned producer and, you know, new artist kind of thing is also kind of fascinating. And Ryder has just convinced Lyric to record a demo with him because he can't understand why people don't see Lyric or hear Lyric the way that he hears him. And part of me is wondering, like, is that just the blinders of being already half in love with him or not? But yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. It's an easy read. I mean, that's what I need. I just need an easy read at the moment. It's a little while later and I finished Spotlight. It is utterly adorable. There is no third act breakup. There are very realistic, for famous people, fights, which I deeply appreciate because, as I said, I think I said earlier, Lyric is determined to make it on his own without Ryder's help. And Harley may or may not turn up in this one. If you read the first book, you'll know who Harley is. And Harley is persuasive and stubborn is probably the best way to describe him. But yes, anyway, they find a way to make it work. And the one thing that I can say that I really liked about this, because we do get to meet Kaylee's mother, Maggie, and she was in the army. But what I really liked was the blended family dynamic, because she is not demonized for being the mother who was not there, and we find out sort of how it came about that Ryder and Maggie had Kaylee in the first place. Their relationship is just great, and then Lyric's relationship with Maggie as well is just lovely, and the way that all three of them sort of build this family together and are really supportive of one another. And I like a feel-good story. Yay, is all I can say. So that leaves Fandom and Encore as the other books to read, and I'm looking forward to doing that immensely. So that will probably be tomorrow's job. All right, good morning everyone. Please excuse the dryer in the background. I am doing laundry while I am reading. It is 10 o'clock. I am 34% of the way into Fandom, which is book 3 in the famous series. And you know, all of the little bits and pieces are falling into place, mostly because I'm paying attention and I'm reading them in a timely manner. So can't remember if I mentioned, but basically the series follows 5 members of a boy band that was constructed and then fell apart. And you have the 5 members. You have Harley, who went on to have a very successful solo career. You have Ryder, who was in the previous book, who left the band because he was raising his daughter on his own. You have Blake, who when the band split up, went on to become an actor and has a successful action movie chain series kind of thing going on. And then you have Mason and Denver. Mason was the oldest member of the band and Denver was the youngest member of the band. And so book 3 is Mason and Denver's story. And throughout the first couple of books, we've basically been told Mason has disappeared and is no longer interested in connecting with anyone, but we don't really know the story. And what we find out is that the night that the band split up, or the night that the news went out to fans that the band was splitting up, Denver and Mason were together and they were sort of drinking and just waiting for the news to drop. And then Denver kissed Mason, kind of spur of the moment, and Mason was taken aback and Denver didn't know how to, you know, deal with that rejection. And so despite the fact that they basically promised that they would always be there for one another for the last 2 years, they've not spoken. And so now that Harley is trying to get all of the group back together for a reunion kind of band thing, he starts off by dragging Ryder to go and see Denver. And Denver unintentionally, and they also drag Blake into it at some point, and then Denver unintentionally reveals where Mason probably is because he was his best friend, and so he knows where he's likely gone to hole up because no one else knows. And so because of all of that, and because Harley ended up at Mason's place, paparazzi found out, and so suddenly Mason has to come back to LA because he can't get away from the media. Anyway, so that's where we're at. Mason turns up on Denver's doorstep and is basically just asking to stay there because he just needs a place to stay, and he wants to try and figure out whatever it's gone on with their friendship. And he's still convinced that, you know, he's not into guys or anything like that. And even Denver's like, well, you're the first and only guy that I've ever felt like this about. And so still processing all of that. On top of that, Denver's career is kind of stalling, and so he is currently a host on a reality singing show. And to make matters even worse, the final 5 contestants have to stay at his house, and it's like a one-on-one mentoring kind of thing going on. So that's where we are at the moment, and Denver recognizes that he still has feelings for Mason, and Mason is beginning to realize that maybe there are some feelings that are not just purely platonic or sibling-like feelings towards Denver. So I'm curious to see where it goes. Anyway, I'm having a lot of fun with it because it's so lighthearted. Like, this one is dealing with some much deeper themes because we find out that Denver, one, has an alcohol problem. Like, he tends to drink to excess and was doing that while he was with the band, but even now there's one scene where he basically gets blackout drunk. We also know that his family history, he was raised by his grandmother because his mother had a drug addiction, I believe it was, and so he doesn't know much about his history. So a lot of his actual past has been suppressed by the team behind the band originally. And also on Mason's part, because he left the public eye and he was trying to hide out, and he ended up gaining some weight and realized that people stopped recognizing him when he gained some weight and grew out some facial hair and stuff like that. He never really did anything to sort of stay in shape, and suddenly when they find him and there's all of that really toxic press around not being the same size you were when you were famous, like, he's dealing with a lot of body issues. And I wouldn't say it's toxic because he's not trying to recreate what he once was, but he's also said, well, I probably only didn't stay fit and in shape because I was hiding. And I'm curious to see whether that's all that it stays at or whether it drifts into more body issues, but I guess we'll see. So yeah, I'm gonna keep reading. So I finished Fandom, and that one was probably the most serious of all of the books so far, but also just really good. It just probably dealt with some more challenging topics than previous books, and there is the death of a pretty big side character as well, which has implications for both Mason and Denver, but their story ended up really, really sweet. And the band is back together, they've got a plan, and the next book is Blake's book. He's the one that became an actor, and he lost a bet. So this book kind of sets up his book where he's an actor and he's been trying to break into more serious roles, and he ends up meeting with a director in Fandom and one of the actors who is a famous queer actor who really wants Blake to be part of this film. And Blake is like, no, I don't think that it would come across well, because he'd be straight playing a gay guy and that could be perceived differently. It could also have backlash for his career. He says it's not so much about playing the gay character, he's fine doing that, but thinking about everything else that goes around it, because a lot of this series is the logistics of being famous in Hollywood, and all of it sucks. Could not be me. At some point during the book, apparently Blake makes a bet with Jordan about Denver and Mason, and Blake loses that bet, and the consequence is that he has to do the film. So that's what the next book is going to be, and I'm kind of looking forward to it, because the little snapshots we've got of Blake have been really fun, and the tiny hints of Jordan. He seems like a really great character to read. So I have faith in Eden Finley. I'm gonna have some lunch, and then I'm just gonna keep reading because it's Sunday. I don't want to do anything else. I need a me reset day just to get through. I'll be back soon to talk about Encore. Okay, I'm 50% of the way into Encore, and my god, these two are a mess in like the most adorable kind of way. So this is Blake and Jordan's story, and Jordan is a very confident gay man. He's totally happy with his life, except he doesn't do relationships, but at the start of this book he's in the relationship with the director of the film that both he and Blake are starring in, and Jordan's like the biggest flirt ever. Like he flirts with everyone, and he flirts with Blake from the moment that he meets him. And they start filming this film, and Blake is all up in his head and kind of can't get over it, and it's making things challenging on the set. We know straight off the bat that Jordan's relationship with his director, whose name is Ben, it's not a great relationship. It's not one that is good for either of them. And then Jordan finds out that basically Ben was cheating on him, and he ends up going with Blake and the rest of the guys from 11 to Montana to stay with Denver and Mason, and they're all, you know, writing and recording songs for the upcoming album and the tour. And because Jordan and Blake cannot help themselves, they make another bet. So the first bet was about whether or not Blake would do the film. This time it's around trying to method act their way through their on-screen chemistry and relationship. There's a whole lot of flirting and banter and kissing and some stuff that doesn't quite cross over into sex, but it's both there. And the deal is, if Blake caves and sleeps with Jordan, then Jordan gets sex and he's happy. And if Blake is able to resist sleeping with Jordan, then Jordan has to sing a song on the 11 tour, and Jordan is petrified because he cannot sing. So the production was put on hold temporarily because Ben was in hospital for reasons that you'll figure out. It's how it comes about that he's cheating. And when I say Blake and Jordan are just a disaster, because you know, Jordan and Blake had this conversation around how Jordan has never been afraid to let guys who thought that they were straight experiment with him, and that when it goes well, it's a high for him, and he's not really one for relationships, but he's happy to help people find their truth. And then what he has to admit later on is that sometimes when it doesn't go well, it burns him badly, and so he just doesn't do relationships. And so he admits all that and basically caves and says, I'm the bet's off. Like we're not doing this. Until he comes face to face with Ben again and basically implies that he's in a relationship with Blake just before they're supposed to film their first on-screen sex scene. So they're constantly flipping back and forth between this bet that they made, which, by the way, the entire side cast of characters from 11 were in on, and that was the most hilarious thing, because they were all trying to help Jordan win while they were staying at Mason's place, and not being very helpful because they kept killing the mood and they kept switching sides for who they wanted to win. It's just giving chaotic energy, and I'm fine with that. Like I like chaos in my books. I like ridiculousness and I like chaos. All right, so I finished Encore, and honestly I think it was my favorite book in the entire series, and I'm trying to pinpoint why it is, but I think it's just because they're such disasters, and I know that's what I said in the last clip, but I thoroughly enjoyed their story. And like, it's complicated because of the director that Jordan was dating, and my God, Blake has the best scene where he just lays into this director, because we find out that the director is leaking information and misinformation about the fact that Blake and Jordan are dating. And there's and the scene that Blake has where he just literally lays into him, basically says, stop going after the person that you know you're going to get a reaction from, when really, if you're going to say something, say it to my face, because I'm not intimidated by you. I've been in the industry for a really long time and I'm not going to stand for it. And basically I have clout, and the reason you haven't gone after me is because you know that. And the whole thing was just great, because I think what I appreciate so much about the series, and this book in particular, is how it looks at the fact that, you know, Hollywood is toxic, and the way that relationships are formed, and the way people are expected to perform and to behave and to just live their lives according to what other people find palatable. Like, that stuff I find really interesting, because there is absolutely nothing appealing to me about Hollywood or celebrity life or anything like that. I legitimately don't care about celebrities' lives because they're doing a job. I find it intensely weird, right? So I think I've talked about this in videos before, but I find it weird when people fan cast actors and people and things and whatever. Like, an actor in a movie or an actor in a TV show or a musician or whatever, they're doing a job. They're doing something because presumably they like to do it. And that's good enough for me. That's what they're doing, and I can love that and I can enjoy it and I can appreciate what they're doing, but I can leave it where it is. Same thing with books. Like, I don't feel the need to take anything out of context and make it weird like so many people do. So I think I like the discussion around that in here and how Jordan and Blake have to navigate that. And it's doubly difficult for Blake because, you know, he's not only an actor, but he's also from a very famous boy band. And even just the resolution of 11 coming back together, and then they do their tour, which is at the end of the book, like the last 15% of the book is just the wrapping up of the series, and it was a really nice wrap up, I should say. And it's them on tour and figuring out what they want to do, and then having an honest and frank conversation about the fact that they are all at different points in their life. So even Harley, who's been the driving force between getting them all back together, is like, well, actually, this has been great and I've loved it and I would like to do it again, but at the moment I want to focus on this, this and this. And everyone's like, oh, thank God, because this is what we want to focus on. And I think that's great, because so much of the series was about them getting back together. And what it really was them rebuilding their relationship after going their separate ways. So I can appreciate that. It was really fun. And I'm glad that I decided to read that this weekend, because I just needed something light and fun. And I mean, even though there's, you know, serious things that are discussed, I'm not going to dismiss that, but I think this was just like the palate cleanser that I needed. So thank you for watching. I know that these series kind of videos are not everyone's cup of tea, because if it's not part of your reading taste, you probably don't want to watch the video, but I enjoy doing them. I enjoy having reactions to them, and you're probably going to see a few more of these moving forward into 2025 anyway, just because of some things that I'm thinking about doing with my content. But I had a great time just getting into this world and sinking into it and just reading things back to back, because as I've said before, this is just what my brain likes, and it helps that I also complete something at the same time. So that's a tick on one of my series goals. So I only have one left, and I'm hoping to finish that off in November, and that will be ticking off my 18 series read or DNF'd in 2024. In the comments, I'd love to know if you've read this series or any of Ian Finley's other books, or if you would like to recommend something that sounds similar, feel free to do that down below. Otherwise, feel free to leave a star emoji to let me know that you're here. I hope the reviewer on the world just staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.